Okay, this video is going to cover the basics of diabetes and what you guys need to know. Diabetes as a whole is a malfunction in the regulation of blood sugar. So make sure you realize it's blood sugar and not blood pressure. That is a common mistake. Blood sugar is where we have sugar in your blood, in your arteries and veins. So sugar is your common name. What we call it is your glucose. So when you look at an actual blood vessel, this is what you see. The outside edges here are your blood vessel. Now, blood vessels obviously carry blood. So these little red circles here represent our blood vessels. Then you also have white blood cells in there, and those are the squiggly black ones. There's more stuff in your blood, but that's kind of a general idea. These little blue dots that are in your blood vessel, all of those represent sugar or glucose that's in your blood. So you eat your food, and your food gets broken down by your stomach, your intestines, and then eventually those nutrients are going to go into your bloodstream. Well, part of those nutrients is the glucose from the food that you eat. So this glucose here is just floating around. Eventually we want that glucose in the cells, but right now it's just in the bloodstream, so we have to get it into the cells. So the way we get it into the cells. So this diagram is a little helpful one. We're going to start on this side over here where it says high blood glucose. So you see your blood vessel and you see all those little glucose molecules in there. So your endocrine system, which involves your pancreas because it releases hormones, is going to realize, hey, we have high blood sugar. We need to get that sugar into our cells to be used. So the pancreas is going to release a hormone called insulin. A hormone is just a small molecule that's a messenger. It'll say, hey, do this. It'll tell something what to do. So insulin gets released. Insulin goes to the cells in your body and says, hey, we have too much glucose in the blood. We need to get it into your cells. So why don't you let it in? And then the glucose leaves the bloodstream. You can see up here where it is lots of glucose and then a little bit of glucose. So the glucose has left the bloodstream and it goes into the blood. Now, that's when you have high blood sugar. On the opposite end, if you have low blood sugar, so if you think about the Snickers commercials, you're not you when you're hungry. So this is when we have low amounts of glucose or sugar in your blood. This would be when you fasted or you haven't eaten for a while. At this point, your body says, okay, we're low on glucose, so the pancreas is going to release a hormone called glucagon. Okay, now the pancreas releases the hormone. Just like it releases insulin, glucagon is just a messenger telling something what to do. So glucagon is going to go to the liver and it's going to say, hey, we're low on glucose. I know you have stored glucose in there, so why don't you let it out and then we can raise our blood sugar. So the liver is going to release that glucose and the blood sugar is going to go up. Now, the major thing is that we want a normal rate of blood sugar, but throughout the day, your blood sugar is going to get high after you eat, and it's going to get low in your times of fasting between the day. So the pancreas and the endocrine system together are going to work to maintain normal glucose levels. Okay, so we say insulin stimulates the cell lets the glucose in, but how does it actually get into the cell? So this is a diagram. This area out here is outside of the cell. So you can think of this as like the bloodstream. Then this area in here is inside of the cell. So what's going to happen is our little hormone insulin, this purple thing, is going to come in. It's going to bind to an insulin receptor on the cell. And that receptor is going to tell the glucose channel, this is the glucose transport protein, or the channel, to open up and let glucose into the cell from the bloodstream. And you can see the arrows showing you that they're going in to the cell. So the key thing to take away is insulin never enters the cell. It stays on the outside at all times. Insulin just says, hey, open up the gate so that glucose can get in. Insulin and glucose never interact, and insulin never goes into the cell. So once glucose is in, what is it used for? The key thing is energy. So our glucose or our sugar gets into our cell, and we're going to use it for energy. And all that energy is to complete cellular tasks, and that's where you're going to get further in your biology. But the key is that we need it for the energy, because that's the whole purpose of eating in the first place, is to get the energy from the food to be able to survive. So diabetes has type 1 versus type 2, because we said diabetes was a malfunction in blood sugar regulation. Okay, so we just said how it normally works. Well, this is where it can mess up. Okay, type 1 is where the pancreas cannot release this insulin. It either doesn't produce enough or it doesn't produce any at all. And so if there's no insulin, then the cells are never told to open the gate and allow the glucose in. So what ends up happening is all this glucose ends up in the bloodstream. Your body's going to eventually flush it out through urine, sweat, things like that, because you can't have just a build up. You become a sugar cube, and that's not good. But your high glucose is just going to stay high. It's not going to lower because the glucose can't get into the cells. And on the flip side, the cells can't get the energy they need because they don't have access to the glucose. So those people are really tired all the time because they aren't getting the glucose because their cells, they can't get the glucose in. So that's type 1. Insulin is not released. On type 2, what happens is that the insulin comes in, it binds to the insulin receptor. But if you look here, I changed the picture where this protein, the glucose transport protein, doesn't open. And so the glucose is out here and it's like, hey, I'm ready to come into the cell, let's do this. And the door is closed. It cannot get into the cell, so there's no glucose on the inside of the cell right here. And so the cell does not get that energy. So in type 1, the insulin is never there because the pancreas can't make it. In type 2, the insulin does its job, but then the cell does not respond to the message from the insulin. And that's your basis of diabetes.